We'll let you call to order.
Okay,
I mean,
calling.
I'll call the order and you call the roll call. There you go.
You do that. So you've called to order then? We're
Yes.
good?
Yep.
Okay. Let me catch that time. Okay, and roll call. Let's see. Member Wheeler.
Here.
Member Jacobson.
Here.
Member Miles. Absent. Member Sperlingwood is
Here.
Member Rockwell.
Here.
Member Davis. Member Crow. And Member Fultz.
Here.
Okay, so as far as I can tell, Member Miles is absent and Member Crow is absent.
Okay. And Member Crow wanted to talk tonight, so we'll have an interesting.
Well, he's the one whose report we're expecting to hear back from.
Yes, I wonder if he had a problem not getting a link either, but you resent it.
Just send it to him again. So
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chair,
yeah, go ahead, Wes.
while we're waiting for Fletcher to join us, if I may take a minute.
Please, Member Wheeler, absolutely.
Thank you. The general manager sent out a letter to city commissioners, UAB members, and others earlier this week, and it's difficult for us as UAB members to respond because of the Sunshine Act, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't send out an email response to all. But I will note that his letter intimated, hinted, inferred, was a repeat of what FPMA was saying about FMPA, whatever it may be, that renewables are to blame for the crisis in Texas. And then I just went through and found, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 major newspaper sites that said, no, wind farms aren't the main cause of the Texas blackouts. That would be New York Times, Washington Post, the CNN, BBC, I could go on and on. It's a little misleading to share articles that say, oh, it's because wind couldn't come up for us doing it. And there's a great quote from the New York Times I like to read. Quote, every time we have challenges with the grid, whether it's in California this past summer or Texas right now, people try to weaponize this for their pet project, which is fossil fuels, end quote, said Leah Stokes, an assistant professor of political science at the University of California, Santa Barbara, whose work was focused on battles over energy policy. Quote, our infrastructure cannot handle extreme weather events, which these fossil fuels are ironically causing, end quote. The Municipal Power Association for Florida is saying, hey, it's intermittent renewables that's causing the issue here. Actually, no, what I'm reading is that it was natural gas that was the issue. The pipes froze, they couldn't get the gas there. Wind power is a small part, very small part of Texas's energy supply in the winter. And ironically enough, places that are so tropical as North Dakota, Canada, Norway, et cetera, all have working wind turbines. So it's, as many others have pointed out, it's a little misleading to blame renewables for this. We do have the reputable news source of Fox News claiming that it is an issue, that renewables are to blame, and as does Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. But beyond those two, I don't see many other folks agreeing with that stance. So that is my response to the general manager's letter, and I appreciate the chance for my rebuttal.
Thanks, Member Wheeler.
I'll certainly, can I say something, Wendell?
Well, hold on and let me finish that thought, and
Okay.
I'll let you respond, General Manager.
Sure.
Thanks. It's an old story. It's, windstorm blew down a couple of miles of high power lines in Australia. And again, they blamed that on renewable energy. So it's a story that has a lot of traction amongst certain people. The truth will actually come out eventually, and we just have to keep on with our work and kind of ignore the naysayers, because it's hard arguing. It's just hard arguing. It's an endless argument. I'm really kind of tired of arguing. So I appreciate you bringing it up, Wes. Go ahead, member, our general manager.
Freudian slip.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, the commentary by member Wheeler. I think if you looked at what FMPA had submitted, I think that the comment, they said it was a problem with policy. And I think that part of that policy involves natural gas, part of it involves renewable. It's a structure of ERCOT. The fact that they don't have the type of reserve amounts that we have here in Florida. I think they reduced it down to 2% from a high of about 10%. We have 15%. So I don't think I was blaming renewables. I think what I was talking about was the overall system. And I think one part of that system was, as Jacob Williams mentioned, that they've replaced 30 gigawatts of power over the past decade with 30 to 50% available wind and solar power that used to be 80% fossil fuel, which does add into the equation, as does the reduction in the reserves, as does the deregulated nature of that marketplace. It's a host of those things, and quite frankly, I don't think either one ought to be blamed solely on this. I think it's kind of a stew, where a bunch of stuff gets thrown into it and you mix it up. And there's, if the lessons learned are going to come out that it's about policy. And that was the main point. I don't think there was anything that I wrote that said renewables are evil, that's what created the problem here. I think I repeated the issue of it being a policy issue. So.
And it is a policy issue, and I agree, but I will point out that the article you shared led off with pointing out that wind turbines failed and then ended up saying we need to guard against solar becoming too prominent in Florida. So yes, it is overall policy, but the message you shared from the FMPA certainly focused on renewables.
And I would continue to say that, in those situations, you saw that at one point, several days prior to the crisis in Texas, 50% of the power was being provided by wind. And at their low during the crisis, it was 2%. And there was a doubling of the gas resources that went in to produce that power. And, the fact is they should have had the capability to triple the gas resources, quite frankly, in those particular cases. So it's kind of a witch's brew of policy that's made from a private entity in a deregulated environment with a little smidge of push from various groups on either side that, unfortunately, I don't know if Dino's on the line, but I know Tom is. When it gets to the reliability of the grid, you ought to listen to the freaking engineers. And that's what wasn't listened to in Texas. So the policy was made outside of that, because I don't know how comfortable we would be in a grid system where we had to have 2% reserves as opposed to 15. There have been situations where that could be catastrophic for folks in this community. And what this ended up promoting was actually a humanitarian crisis that isn't even in the electric system. It was the fact that people are out there. Half the people in Texas are under a boil water advisory. So this is really, really a bad policy, and they've got to get it right.
Thank you, General Manager, for that comment. We have another comment from Member Rockwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to piggyback on that and say one of the things that I read about the situation was that because Texas had become so unreliant on gas, they had started selling it to other states and other markets, and they were contractually obligated to sell their gas. They couldn't use their own gas for backup systems. I don't know, this is just something I read. I don't know can't 100% vouch for the veracity of it, but I think it all does boil down to the fact that it's a highly deregulated system and they didn't have enough options. I think that's the big takeaway is you got to have oversight and you got to have options.
Well, and I would add, Member Rockwell, I mean, we were in a bind here in GRU because we didn't have enough nominated gas, quite frankly. We were left running gas at SEC, but we went to solid fuel and liquid fuel for a period of 3 days. So we were running, coal at DH2. Thank goodness we didn't just go to, natural gas options out there. And we went to, the biomass plant, and we were actually loading number 6 fuel oil, I think, into DH2. Tom can give you more information on that. But, and this happened, last year as well. We run into those situations. I think, the price on some of this, the natural gas was, I heard numbers as high as $1,000 a million BTU out in Texas. And I know the Florida market got up into the 20s. So you had some folks that, are denominated in natural gas that, paid a real price here in Florida as well.
All right. Thanks for the comments. I will add my 2 cents worth in. I came out of the aerospace industry after the Challenger accident as a thermal analyst whose background is fully embedded in heat transfer. It was my job to sign off on thermal analysis. And so it was the easiest thing to check on the environment. So the issue of the O-rings and the solid rocket booster was, to me, the ultimate insult. But people in Treasure had to die because they couldn't spec out an O-ring properly. Apparently, from my in-depth reading of the Texas incident, we ended up with gas turbines that were not rated to operate at -10 in the colder temperatures. They cheaped out on the purchasing price to cut corners because they're in a low margin, high profit revenue type open market. Now that's fine by them. But again, if you end up speccing out gas turbines that can't run in extreme temperatures that you will get every 30 years or so, well, this is a problem you run into. Now, the last time I saw the counting, it was close to 30,000 megawatts of gas turbine off for 3 different reasons. 1, they weren't spec'd out to run that cold. 2, the wells supplying them were tripping offline because they weren't designed to operate in that cold temperature. And so again, the whole thing is a terrible insult to my profession that we can't spec a damn O-ring out correctly after all these years. And that it happened to natural gas makes me not feel good because evil fossil fuels. We're beyond that. These people suffered because of cutting corners and chimping out on specifications that they shouldn't have cut corners on. And so here we all pay the price, but very little of that had anything to do with renewable energy. Policy covers all, and policy was make some money, open the market, do it this way. And that's just not the right way to do it. So.
Chair Porter?
Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
Well, first, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to drop off in about 2 minutes here. Wish I could stay longer, but I just want to add my 2 cents on this. I'm not sure if Robin shared the email I sent today to add to the notes that were going on. I think part of the challenge of all this is people are not the public in general is not terribly discerning. They just hear solar good, solar bad, this was a mix of a lot of things in there. Unfortunately, the devil's in the details. People will hear, oh, biomass isn't good. Because if you grow trees and cut them down and burn them for biomass, no, it's not good. But that's not what GRU is doing. So I think you need to be really careful in what we say and how we say it, and because we are talking to the general public, that's how things are going to be perceived. In the email that I sent to Rob, and for this IRP discussion, I think is very important, is that my understanding from what I'm hearing from GRU staff in general is that they're dealing with CO2 as within the confines of GRU, and GRU does a great job. But if you start looking at just within those confines rather than the whole picture, you get very different answers over if you just look at the confines of GRU, biomass is terrible, produces tons of CO2, but we know that's not the whole picture. And I think one of the issues we have with the IRP, or that I have, is that I think we say we have an apples and oranges comparison of, are we looking at the life cycle, or are we looking at just what happens within the plant? And I think that's where things have gotten crosswise at times. But I think it's very important as we're trying to have planning discussions. So with that, I will sign off, or at least hang off for a while.
Barry, are you leaving now?
Dixon, thank you. Go ahead, Member Wheeler.
Is Barry, are you leaving, or are you going to stay for a few minutes?
I have about 4 minutes, and then I got to jump.
Well, while we still have some members on, I think we were all hoping to hear from Fletcher tonight on his report to us and discuss it. I don't think we're going to, so I'd like to ask Robin to follow up with Fletcher to have his report sent to us by email after this meeting. I'd also like to request that we have for our next workshop 2 discussions if we don't discuss IRP or in addition to IRP, but I'd like to have staff come back to us to discuss where the utility stands in promoting electric vehicles as a revenue source. I'd like to have city staff, transportation staff, GRU staff talk about possible incentives for electric vehicles, for electric transit. And I'd like to have a presentation. Member Foltz has been bringing us up some really great topics, really great questions on demand management. So I'd like to have a presentation on what the utility is doing to encourage, incentivize, promote demand management conservation. So I'm asking the board approve or suggest those 2 topics at our next workshop.
All right, since a workshop doesn't have a vote per se, we'll just add things to our workshop. So
If you don't request it, the staff won't come back with anything.
yes. So basically, your first topic was EV discussion from staff on how to incentivize EV.
Yes, how we can get the city and the Mass Transit Authority and the utility, how can we start promoting through our policy plan, through the IRP, and more importantly, through direct immediate projects? How do we move to an all EV local transit scene, local transportation scene?
And your other comment was plans for demand side management. And I would.
Yeah, the second topic is I'm following up on Member Foltz, who was with us a minute ago, but he's had lots of great questions about demand management. I'd like to learn more about that in our workshop as well. What we can do, more importantly, what more we can do. I mean, I'd like staff to speak to those issues, but what I'd like the board to do is step up and say, this is what we want done next. What more can we do to make these things happen?
And I would, I think Jason, Member Foltz needs to respond. He had his hand up. Go ahead, Member Foltz.
Sure. If I could just add 2 subheadings to that DSM conversation that Member Wheeler is requesting. One of them in the IRP, it specifically references a study on DSM that was initiated by Nexent Inc. And it specifically says in the IRP that this is something that could be very valuable that GRU should pay attention to. So if possible, I'd like that report to be part of that conversation. And then the other kind of subheading to that is more conversation looking forward about the possibilities of AMI as a tool to aid in energy efficiency and shifting heat consumption. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Foltz, who took the words right out of my mouth, the AMI, and using that as an incentivization tool to, somebody's having a good time.
Yeah, it's not on my end. I got to tell you that.
Not on mine either. But basically, how to get the demand side management and AMI to talk to each other to move that peak. And I also say that one of the things that we should be looking at is time of use billing. Because General Manager Belarski is very correct. Over the years, we've had problems trying to get the public to change their way they use electricity to benefit the operation of the utilities. One of the ways to do that is to incentivize them. Time of use. Some of the disparate rates in California are eye-watering if you use power in the wrong time of the day. And they would get my attention very quickly. So that would be to add into that one. So.
And Chair Porter, can I add one more thing to the list?
Yeah, go ahead, Member Jacobson.
So one thing I've been really interested in is what's the cost or benefit to GRU if people convert from natural gas to electricity? I have a lot of interest in electrification, but I'm not heartless. I understand the pressures GRU is under, so I want to, I'm just interested to know the numbers to say if someone had a gas furnace and replaced it with a heat pump, what are the impacts of that financially for GRU?
Right. Good point. Good point.
I'd love to see.
I mean, we can look at what some of those impacts are. It's just like what's the old expression? You don't want to do math from the dais. I don't think anybody would want to be doing math right now on Zoom.
It's hallway engineering. We call it hallway engineering, and you always race back to your office to check to see if you blabbered something that was not
Right.
physically possible.
Right. Quick, get an email out saying,
Right.
"Oop."
Yeah. Member Rockwell, I think you had your hand up, and then we've got Foltz and Sperlingwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, while we're talking about, demand side, and I just want to make sure. So you're talking about incentivizing demand, but then you're talking about charging people more if they use it at the wrong. That's not really incentivizing. That's penalizing. But if you want to talk about real incentivizing, the number one way to bring demand down is to improve people's homes. Better insulation, better windows, and you know where I'm going with this.
Oh, absolutely.
Not everybody's got money to do that. So, I was thinking when you were talking about incentivizing, I was like, if GRU is going to spend money but you're not talking about spending money. You're talking about charging people money. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, all this, we know what needs to be done to bring demand down, but it costs money. And so for people to do those things, I don't have the answer. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Member Rockwell. And sorry I didn't finish the rest of that. The other side of incentivization is to actually charge a very, very low price. Say, for example, when you pour solar into the grid in the middle of the day, maybe charge 8 cents instead of 15. So yeah, the hammer's down on the bad side, but yeah, you can play that and save some money. So yeah, sorry I didn't finish that out, Member Rockwell. You're absolutely correct on the efficiency of our homes. Absolutely. Member, I think next was Teresa. Did you have a comment? And then Member Miles does.
Yeah, I would just like to say, as we're talking about all this, what about schools? You have to be in school during the day. What about your businesses that have to operate? So just throwing that out there, it's hard to reduce when everybody's using power because you have to air condition a school and keep the students and the teachers happy.
Teresa, haven't you ever heard of night school?
Fortunately,
I'm
most.
just putting it out there as we talk about residential. Let's not forget the business side of the house and the commercial side of the house.
Absolutely not. Other states and other locales have done that. What first thing we do on any conversation is to look to see how they did the same thing. So, excellent comment, Teresa. And I'd never forget that. So, Member Miles, go ahead.
Hey, y'all, I'm sorry I'm late. I just jumped off another meeting, but I just came in on the tail end of Member Rockwell's comments. And I still, you all know that I'm oftentimes referring us back to some of the assets that we do have for the utility to help us with inefficiency of homes. And those programs, some of them do not work as well as they could. And so I still think we need to revisit things like the LEAP program For one reason, one is more investment. And two is the structure of the LEAP program, and the requirements are, again, HUD requirements. And so they have a tendency to block out people who are not homeowners, but that are still affected by high rents. People that are in heirs property that can't participate because we have HUD guidelines. We should have the same flexibility when we collect that money out of their bill or wherever that money comes from. We need to be just as adamant and deliberate about returning that to the customer and allowing them to use their own money. It's just so strange to me when I help people with LEAP applications, how many people, everybody pays into this tax, but only a percentage of folk are able to use their own money. And so I still have a problem with that. I've discussed it with Tara Thomas. I've discussed it with Bill Shepard. And my next move is to push my city commissioners to push from their end, that we revamp that program, we take it apart, we look at it, and we rewrite it so that we can rent. We don't have, if we're not receiving HUD money to do those programs, I'm not quite sure why we have HUD guidelines. And I just wanted to mention, while we're moving towards renewable energy, if we don't address these housing failures and the infrastructure, then you can put solar, windmills, I don't care what you put on there. They're going to lose energy from their inefficient homes, and you're still going to have people that are disproportionately paying more than others because of failing housing infrastructure. And we have to, at some point, realize that we have the responsibility in this community to help our neighbors that cannot help themselves. And so we can talk about solar and all that good stuff. We have an elephant that sits in our city, and I have people that's presenting with me $600 and $700 bills. And while they want to blame the utility company, and I even want to blame Ed Bilarski at this point, but I can't totally, I can't totally place that there, because I go and I audit these homes. And when I audit these homes, I find out that our windows and our roofing, and like Tim said, the insulation and other things are effective. And when I try to get them the help that they need, we're hit with barriers. So we have to dig a little bit deeper than just throwing a program on there, and make sure that the programs that we have equity embedded in them, and that they're working and reaching the people that need them the most. Other than that, we got money sitting that we may have to switch, or just a lot of funds left at the end of the year repurposed. And we need to be fixing houses.
Thank you, Member Miles. Have you been in touch with Mary Alford?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, good. She's starting a nice push on that. I
Absolutely.
wish her all the luck, and I'm with her all the way on that. So you keep in touch with that. Although Sunshine Law says we just talked to Mary. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you, Member Miles.
responses to multiple members.
Yes, we have. Let's see. Teresa talked. Okay, Member Wheeler, you're up next.
Thank you. In response to Member Miles and to Member Rockwell and to Chair Porter, the reason why I brought up electric transportation, electric transit, and demand management, they're two sides of the coin. And we need to keep all this in context. We talk about rates, but the best way to bring rates down and about equity is for folks who can't afford higher power bills, is to do exactly what Member Miles is saying. We need to be encouraging conservation. We need to be lowering the total bill. Fixating on just the rate itself is meaningless if we don't get total demand down, total usage down. And to Member Rockwell's point, yes, these programs cost money, but if we help folks pay their bills, that's a gain for us, a gain for the community, and we find new revenues to offset that by selling to electric vehicles, selling to chargers, selling to transit, selling to the school board. We find new revenues to balance what we've spent on the demand side. It all fits together. It's just getting the pieces to fit. It's doable, but we need to focus on the bigger picture of lowering total rates for folks and finding new means of revenue. And that's how it balances.
I think you mean reduce total bills for customers, because the rates will go up, but the usage will go down. So I think you meant bills.
Yes.
Yeah.
That the total rate, the total amount paid by each customer could be reduced by demand management, even if the rate goes up.
Okay, well, thank you for those comments. We have Member Crow has joined us. Obviously, Fletcher, we've started a nice conversation while we were wondering if you could join us. You had some things you wanted to talk to us about tonight or present to the board, right?
Well, I sent a request to Robin to have half an hour on the question of our comments on what the new integrated resource plan should look like. I didn't receive anything back from that, and I wasn't even sure there was going to be a meeting tonight because I didn't get an invite.
Yeah, the Zoom link, there was a problem with some of us got it and some of us didn't. So, but that got sent out again. Obviously, you found it, but sorry about that confusion on the reply. Um, but if you had any thoughts or if you had a report, you can send that along to Robin and she can email it out to all of us. But if you had comments right now, we'd be happy to hear them.
Okay, great. What I did was a month ago, we had a session where everybody sort of blue skied what they thought the integrated resource plan should include. And so I wrote like a 3-page single-spaced recollection of what I heard, my notes, and I sent that to everybody. But and then following that, Wendell sent his ideas, but that's the only communication that I've had. Now, we had talked about having an amalgamated document that would incorporate everyone's ideas, and then I would be happy to, edit it and put it together with glue, and then we could transmit that to GRU. But so not really in the point to be able to get it out of the oven quite yet. I'm not sure what can be done in the next meeting 2 weeks from today. But if I can get on the agenda for that, of course, we can work on it then. Otherwise, we'll wait to the next workshop, which I guess is a month from today.
Member Crow, if I remember right, just to make sure we don't lose track of some things, I think Member Jacobson and Member Foltz also submitted comments to that along with mine. So I think there was 3 of us that had written comments that went on the record, I think.
Okay.
Mr. Chair Porter, I submitted comments as well.
That's right. That's right. I knew I was forgetting somebody. How could I forget you, Member Wheeler? Good grief.
Okay, well, I certainly no doubt have copies of all those, and I can, of course, lace them together. Is next meeting, that is in 2 weeks, is that appropriate time to devote to this, or should we wait for 4 weeks?
We should wait for a workshop because the regular meetings, we probably have things we need to vote for in a public meeting, and this is a long-term effort. It's an important topic we're looking at, the integrated resource plan. They're on schedule for having a new one come out. So to get our ducks in a row and get a recommendation to the city on what they need to ask that the utility puts into that plan, we need to be careful and methodic about how we do that. So we need to move with all due haste, but not undue haste,
All right, just to repeat what you said, let's definitely schedule at least half an hour at the next workshop for this topic. I'll do my part and amalgamate what I see in my inbox together in one draft document that can be sent out for review and editing before that session. But we'll definitely plan on at least half an hour at the workshop a month from today, and we'll keep that as our star to navigate against. But do we have other topics that we're definitely going to discuss tonight?
We're chewing on basic aspects of what we started on. If I can summarize it, basically, we're looking at demand side management issues, and within that is the whole issue that Member Miles brought up about our housing. That's a part of demand side management that goes outside the utility's purview, but still is part of what the utility has to deal with. And then demand side management inside the utility's purview is a way to control your peak, which is a way to control capital expenditures. Some of the tools we have to do that are AMI, and one of the possibilities is time of use billing. And again, Member Rockwell caught me out completely. only mentioning the stick and not the carrot. So thank you, because I would hate to get on recorded media as mentioning only the stick. That's not me. So thank you, Member Rockwell. But there is ways to definitely play with your utility bill and save yourself some money. I used my own example. If I intended to come home after having turned my air conditioner off on a hot August afternoon and turn the pool pump on, the air conditioning on full blast, cook dinner, put 3 loads of laundry in, and take a hot shower all at the same time, well, on an August afternoon, the utility hates me. They've probably got to hook up a Briggs and Stratton generator and plug it into the network to get everything going if everybody does that. So again, demand side management and AMI, these things tie together real well. It's one of the reasons why we do AMI across the country, is to get a better handle, because right now your bill is in arrears.
Well, that's still a lot better than in Houston, where people are getting $6,000 electric utility bills.
All right, thank you for bringing that up. Again, if you ever go to electric page in Texas, you've got like 2 whole complete web pages of 200 different plans that you can buy your power from. You want to buy it only on orange-headed Wednesdays, then you can probably find a plan for that. But they had one small market plan that sold on the spot market, and very clearly told you that if you had an upset, you'd pay spot market prices. But normally you would be on the cheap and buy it cheap. They had very few, but very noticeable residential customers. The power plan actually sent an email out before the storm saying, please, if you can get off our plan and you're a residential consumer, get off our plan, because you won't be able to afford it. Most of the really ugly bills are coming from people that chose that plan. In an completely open market, then the marketplace can chop and slice and dice and produce any plan they want to. That is not a plan for the risk averse. That was a terrible plan for people to buy into. And they're the ones with the big bills that look horrible. But thankfully, that's not a big market there. They didn't have millions of customers on that billing structure, maybe hundreds, or thankfully in the low thousands, not 10 million. If I'm not correct, anybody want to correct me if I missed that one, but I think that's the case on that horrible bill situation in Texas.
Yeah, that's what happens when you get into the deregulated markets and you have that much choice. I went through that when I was up with Panther Creek up in Pennsylvania. We went through the choice program up in 1996, and you give people the opportunity to make stupid decisions, and then when they suffer the consequences of stupid decisions, they get exercised in this particular case, and in a lot of cases they won't have to pay the bills. They'll find other folks that will, or the state will come in and step in. I mean, I was one of the partners in our project was Constellation Energy. They own regulated utility, Baltimore Gas and Electric, and that was part of their AMI as well. They tried to control people's thermostats and various appliances and things like that, and that they bought into a program, got a discount. Of course, whenever it was applicable, they had problems with the customers that said, no, I don't want this. I don't want my temperature being at 64 degrees in the house. I want off the plan. So, I would just caution that that's one of the problems when you start looking at AMI to solve problems of building new generation. There's separate and distinct issues. You think you can mitigate peak, but it's ironic to me that we started this conversation talking about what happened in Texas as a result of unforeseen circumstances where you couldn't control demand, and everyone's wringing their hands about it. And now we're talking about the IRP, and we're saying we got to take into account the fact that we got to reduce demand.
Well, it's funny,
to reduce the peak. You're talking, in a lot of ways, you can't have it both ways.
Well,
that's why we're developing the IRP for those peak demands when you can't get those kind of savings, because you need to have that for those unforeseen circumstances. It's called reliability.
Well, we'll watch how history pans out. There's various organizations around the world that are actually selling negative power as a dispatchable load reduction in contractual arrangements, and we'll see how that works out, and so we can see what we can plan for the future. So,
Mr. Chair,
yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
just as a follow-up, Fletcher, Member Crow asked if you could recap what we've been talking about. You mentioned demand management for our next workshop.
Yeah.
Also like to know that we've also been discussing a electric vehicle, electric transit discussion as the flip side of that, generating new revenues.
Yeah, thank you, Member Wheeler. And that got back to the other thing that Barry, I didn't want to lose sight of what Barry mentioned, and that was what is the cost? What is the money management exercise from GRU's point of view of trading a gas customer to an electric customer? If I can paraphrase what Barry said, I think that's what he was looking at. Yeah. All right. So obviously, there's a lot of things on the table, and there's a lot of things that we're looking at, and it's a very, very quickly changing market. A lot of stuff is going on. When people ask me about the utility industry, I tell them to look at California, Texas, New York. For good or bad, those are the ones that are changing the most and the quickest. I think New York is probably doing it in the most methodical fashion. Read slowly, but maybe that's the better answer than California or Texas. But again, look at who's changing. Massachusetts has also got some interesting changes going on in their grid, but a lot of change going on right now, and also around the world. General Manager Belarski likes to point out that many of the examples I point out are in areas that have much higher utility rates than we do here in the South. At the same time, once some of the barriers drop in price by that differential, then they should be okay here too. For example, Texas probably got some real cheap rates, at least they did before this happened, and yet they're putting in 2,600 megawatts of battery storage in the next 2 years in a completely open market. So that is just an indication of how fast things are changing. Not that we're behind or this or that or the other, but the picture is changing very fast, and to not be left behind, we'll need to move too, but not too quickly and not too slowly. So that's my straddling the barbed wire fence issue for the night. Yeah. Member Crow, go ahead.
I have a couple of points that I had wanted to address that are not demand reduction points at all. In doing the work that I've done, I came up to several big questions, which may have been dealt with by the UAB long before I was a member, and just haven't been dealt with while I've been a member. So if what I'm saying is duplicative, then forgive me. One thing that keeps coming up is the GFT, the General Funds Transfer. I'd like to have a presentation or some background information on, the algorithms by which it's generated, what's, the historical background of how it has worked, what it looks like in the future, how much it generates, that sort of thing. Just a general all-purpose introduction. If other members want to have a session devoted to that. And in addition to that, another issue that keeps cropping up is the ability to float bonds on Wall Street in New York. Some people are saying, of course, that after the recent purchase of the renewables plant, the bonding ability is quite limited. But I don't have any facts or figures on that. I'd like to know what the situation is, what the bonding capabilities are, what's open, what the implications are, both what happened in the past and what we're looking at as prospects for the future.
All right, thank you, Member Crow. Probably caught me smiling when you mentioned the GFT. I think My all right, don't get me started, member Miles. I don't think there is an algorithm. It's just like pay through the nose. So sorry if that steps on anybody's toes, but if I am correct, General Manager Bilarski, isn't there a mediation effort? Isn't something going on between GRU and the city on coming up with a way to make that a plan? Go ahead.
Yeah, years ago there was a formula, and I think it's maybe been 2 years ago that the formula was it ended, and that's when we presented a lot of information to the city commission. I guess at the same time the UAB about GRU's impending shortfall in cash as a result of having to pay that GFT. And, we took a lot of steps over the past 2 years. One of them was a restructuring of some bond debt that resulted in 4 or 5 years of significantly reduced debt service that would be layered on in, I think, 2025 timeframe going forward. It's called a scoop and dump in the parlance of the Wall Street folks. You scoop out a period, a level of debt service, and you dump it out into the future. And that's allowed us to pick up $13 million more in cash each year. Unfortunately, what's happening is that we haven't reduced the general fund transfer. And part of the idea was that when we did that, we'd also reimagine the general fund transfer, and that those funds that we were saving would go toward things like AMI, CIS. In fact, there was a approval process that went through the city commission that said that money would be directed toward that. And what we're finding is that those monies are being used to make up reserves that are being used to pay the $38.4 million we pay in GFT. The bottom line, Member Crow, is that we're paying more than what we earn in terms of a general fund transfer, and we're doing it to the tune of, $10 million a year. And what we did is we said, this was always an agreement that had to be made between the city manager and the general manager. And so you can imagine how difficult it would be for the city manager to say, yeah, I'll take $10 million less in general fund transfer. And for me to say, yeah, I'll continue to pay $10 million more. I mean, what's the negotiating position? We're peers, we're equal. So we went to the city commission and said, I mean, we're not going to reach agreement here. So we ended up getting a consultant in-house by the name of Mfront that looked at this, and they did a really poor job of coming up. They basically snagged a number that's kind of in between and tried to work around it. When we called them on the fact that the savings from this restructuring had already been accounted for with the other technology improvements, they went, oh. So they came out with another option that is closer to what we believe. And I think the city commission is scheduled to see that at some time at the end of March. But I'm sure there's going to be a big discussion about it. I mean, it's a number somewhere between 27 million and 36 million, where it's $38 million today. So we have I appreciate you bringing up the issue, because it goes toward the landscape that we're living in right now. GRU is no longer the utility it was a decade ago, and we don't have the type of free cash flow that we used to be able to generate. I mean, years ago, when we built the coal plant, we were a net exporter of power. We were an efficient operation. We now have 5 plants that are over 39 years of age. We can't compete against a lot, on a price basis. We can on a reliability basis against some of the, combined cycle gas plants that are out there. And as a result, the city's investment in the utility doesn't give the same return on investment it once does. But quite frankly, they're trying to live off that value that they once had. So in a lot of discussions, that's what you'll hear from me, as well as some other folks from GRU staff. When you start talking about initiatives and things that we can do, we're limited in some of those things. For example, when we looked at the IRP, we talked about the funds necessary to go to 100% renewable, but there's significant funds also to replace the fossil plants that we have out there as well. So either way we go, there's going to be a significant amount of capital expenditures and bonding that will be required, which is why back in January this preceding year, I had looked at talking with FP&L about the opportunities to expand our transmission access and not provide all our generation or substantially all, or not even be self-sufficient in terms of generation. We kind of opened up the blinders there. And of course, that's fraught with problems as well, because you don't have controls over how much you pay for that transmission or for the price of that power. So in a nutshell, we're looking to reimagine what that general fund transfer should be. We've used the consultant to try to get a barometer and a formula on that. I joked with the commission, and I may have joked with the UAB as well, that I think the contract was $35,000 for the consultant. I said, look, I'll do it for $30,000. I'll give you the formula. This is our profit. Here's what we pay. I mean, it's really, let's face it, folks, it's really not much more complicated than that, right? Each year you could say, okay, GRU has a lot of reserves. So, we can make it be plus or minus 10% because we want the city to be able to plan what it needs in terms of its budget. So I understand that. But, over the past, since 2003, we've spent somewhere in the order of $50 million more than what we've earned. And we project through 2026 that we'll pay $118 million more than what we will have earned. So it's not a sustainable model. And it's something that the UAB ought to be aware of when we start looking into the future. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't borrow, but I will give you a statistic. We have $1.6 billion in debt, the same debt that Orlando Utilities has, but they have 2.5 times the revenue that we do. So for us, we're at about a 3.8 multiplier on our debt to revenue. The other comparables in the state are at 2 or below. So the rating agencies look at that and they're concerned going into the future that we can sustain some of this additional debt. And we are too. I mean, we need to be able to take some of these monies and defease debt. We need to be able to pay off debt. And that's why I also am concerned when I hear that we have to expend more money for conservation programs, for incentives, where in the past we've spent, tens of millions of dollars in those types of programs. So I'm certainly not against these things. I'm just wary of where they could lead the utility. And we're kind of in a period of time of needing to get our ship righted and in order and not be, and I appreciate what your reporter is saying, about not falling too far behind. But we've lived a life where we were an early adopter of programs, and it's hurt us, quite frankly. We're living with the consequences of those early adoptions, and we will probably impose more risk on the utility by doing more early adoption than by defeasing debt and doing some of the other things that we need to do. So yeah, I'm sorry, Chair Porter, I know you wanted a short answer there for the GFT.
I did.
Yeah, and I certainly did not go short, so I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. This is the world we live in with this kind of stuff. So there's just no way around it. I would like to remind everybody that, again, Barry's comment about our careful language is even more so, that a bunch of us here on this UAB board have worked for many, many years tirelessly in the community to make housing more efficient. and we will continue to do so. But housing is an issue that the city should be looking at. And so some of I know we're tied into the utility, and we want to say everything we could do on this forum to help that market out, that economic sector, our community out, because that's what we believe and that's what we work in. But the fact of the matter is the city can't continually use the utility as a whipping post to solve the problem the city needs to solve. So again, the whole issue about housing is something that, again, that's why I mentioned Commissioner Alford's new efforts just recently, an interesting way to get around some of those issues, and hopefully she will meet with great success. So again, just my rant and rave on that one. But quite a while back, I think I completely ignored a hand up by Teresa, member Sperlingwood. Did you have a question or comment, Teresa, that I totally ignored? I'm sorry if I did. Silence on that.
That hand has been up.
No, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Teresa. Sorry. Yeah.
Chair Porter, I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but if I could just really quickly tell Member Crow, because I've tried to email him about this and he hasn't responded. I think a lot of the things that he has questions about at various meetings some of them could be alleviated if he had his orientation. He came in just as we were going into the pandemic and he never got to have his orientation. I'm happy to schedule some virtual orientation sessions for you, Member Crow. If you will, let's get together through email. I'll be happy to work that out, and I know that it will be very helpful for you. I wanted to throw that out while we're here. So.
Thank you, Robin. And that's a good piece of advice. I learned a heck of a lot going through orientation. That would answer a number of questions, I'm sure. We've got some items we put on for the next workshop. Member Crow has got some things on his plate that he offered to do. Anybody else have anything for tonight's meeting? All right, I have one geeky question. Either General Manager Bilarski or Mr. Brown could probably answer that. And that is, I'm just reading through the IRP and looking at the Texas thing. And I had a question I couldn't answer. And that is, when you're running Deer Haven 2 at 228 megawatts, what is your backup reserve? What do you use for backup?
Oh, we need to have backup?
Sorry.
You absolutely have to be able to replace your largest unit, and that rule changed, I believe. Dino, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that rule changed about 6 or 7 years ago. And because of that rule change, you're having to replace your largest units. Very seldom do we run it above 125 megawatts. For the point you're just making, Chair Porter, that we don't have 200 megawatts to back it up with. We have obviously CT 1, 2, and 3, and we have normally the spin capacity on Deer Haven 1. We'll have Deer Haven 1 sitting there at 22 megawatts like we do today, gives us about 50 megawatts of spin plus whatever margins in the other units, but we won't run it above that. Now, during this recent gas shortage, you'll see from our records, we did run it at 200 megawatts, but we were exporting 100 megawatts and selling it into the grid and making a few bucks on it. But if we lost the T line, obviously that load would go away and we'd only need 100, which was our native load. And we could replace the 100, which is our native load.
Gotcha. Okay, that answers that. Thank you. I just couldn't make the math work. I was trying to add in the kitchen sink and the Briggs and Stratton and everything else, and I was wondering, gee, how you did that. That
was a great question. That was a great question, Chair Porter. It really was, because it goes to the fact that sometimes when we look at our capacity in the system, we just don't have as much as you think we do.
That's right. That's exactly right. On the other side of the coin, there's many times where 200 megawatts would get you through most hours of the day. In fact, that's probably my next question, and I'll geek out. I'll probably end up calling Dino or Tom on this one. Is that hours at load? Like, how many hours do we have at 400 megawatts in a year?
We have that information, but I don't have it in front of me.
No, that's all right. I'll send you an email, or I'll give you a phone call, and I'll look at that. Something came up. I ran into this in some of the research I was doing back when I was working for Extension, and looking at that, hours at the extreme is extremely profitable investigation.
If I had to guess, it's probably 1 or 2%. It's
Yeah.
very small.
Right. But see, if I was doing air conditioning, I typically pick a 92.5% day as my air conditioning design limit. Then I won't over design, because I know that if I get hotter than that, the air conditioning will just run full blast, and my temperature in my building might raise an hour, but everything will still work. You can't do the same in power plants.
No, and we have to make that load if it's 425 megawatts, plus keep our emergency reserve for the grid, which is another 42 megawatts.
That's right.
Plus be able to replace our biggest unit, which at that point would probably be 125 megawatts. So it gets tight for us.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Tom, for that answer. I totally missed the fact that we weren't running Deerhaven 2 at 228. All right. That's it for me. Member comments from anybody? Member Crow, please.
Yeah, I just want to underscore what you just said. I think that a lot of people just reading the morning newspaper or whatever are going to have that same question that you ask, maybe in a less geeky way, but basically people are going to, no, they're seriously, it's a question that's on the public's mind. Is my utility going to be reliable if we have a terrible situation like they had in Texas? And so what is the answer to that, basically? I mean, is it possible for us to have another Texas, or are we pretty well padded?
Yeah, we operate our grid here in Florida entirely different. I don't think Texas is possible in Florida. We'd have another screw up, but not Texas. Go ahead, Mr. Brent.
Tom wants to jump in here. This is his.
You know, I will say last week we had a situation very similar to Texas. It was not unusual. We could not buy gas. We could nominate it. They couldn't deliver it. Yeah. And had it not been for the diversity of fuels within the GRU system, we wouldn't have been able to get power. And getting power off the grid through our transmission lines would have been constrained. We couldn't pull in 400 megawatts off the transmission line. They're not robust enough to do it. Well, so we had that situation, and we responded and answered the bell. And it's through diversity and the number of different technologies we have that we're able to deal with those kind of things. And we did it while we had one of our major units offline. I mean, Kelly's down for a retrofit.
Yeah. Well, you see, this is a situation where an open market doesn't have a mechanism to pay for backup. And so from a climate-centric type of answer, with a little bit of discernment to the actual functioning of the grid, I don't mind at all keeping an aging coal-fired, natural gas-fired power plant in the background to run for those. Just the question I asked Mr. Brown, how many hours a year are you at extremes? But if you can run the whole grid on renewables and backups and biomass and things of that nature, and then 14 times a year you have to turn some aging clunker on and run it, but you pay through the nose for that, and your paying and billing mechanism allows you to do that, I still say that's a success, because again, it's hours at operation. If you look at the capacity factor of the coal-fired power plants in this country, the capacity factor has dropped every year for the last 10 years. And that means we're going in the right direction, but they're still available if you got to turn something on. Until we completely transition, that's probably where we'll end up in the near term. Go ahead, Member Wheeler. I think you wanted to comment.
Just a quick follow-up. I couldn't pass the opportunity to say, if we have given Mr. Brown's comments about the difficulty of purchasing fuel in the open market from other regions because of Texas, that just highlights the importance of having locally produced renewables like biomass and solar to be self-reliant. I just had to make the comment.
Yeah. And
no, actually, it doesn't do that, though. Quite frankly, it doesn't at all. In fact, it exacerbates the problem. It shows that for example, in Texas, those clunkers that, and I'm glad Wendell said what he said, because they got rid of those clunkers in the Texas market. They went to gas to back up on a more reliable basis the renewables that they were putting in. So they basically went between three different options. They went with wind, solar, and backup with a lot of natural gas. So they became heavily reliant on natural gas, and taking coal out of the mix really hurt them. I mean, that's the old adage about gas has to get through to a pipeline to get to you, but you can have all that energy on the ground ready to put in your boiler if it's a coal pile.
But
and
you
that's
have
exactly
to remember,
what we had.
Ed, the
What's
reason
that?
they went to natural gas was not because they fell in love with renewable energy. It was because of the price.
Yeah.
They put that.
But the
natural
reason
gas
they had
on
natural gas was that's what they did to back up the renewable. You still got to remember they needed to back up the renewable with fossil burning power plants.
right,
Which
but
was
they would.
available because the market couldn't make it available or because it was frozen. I'm not an engineer, but it's my understanding that solar panels do generate energy. That's just my understanding, as biomass does. That's just, if you're burning.
But it doesn't store it, member Wheeler. That's the point.
Well, we can argue about this all the time, and we will until we get an IRP that we can send to the bank and recommend that we go in a direction to the city commission. But again, as I say, this is a lot of changes happening, and we're dealing with a lot of things going on, and we're all going to have to come to some point together. Like they said when they signed the Declaration of Independence, gentlemen, we should all hang together in this endeavor, or we shall surely all hang separately.
Hey, are we signing something like that tonight?
No, just
okay.
Just scaring you, just scaring you.
Yeah.
And then the fear, the backup fear is that the middle part of your market that has money just says, the heck with you guys talking about it. I'm just going to put solar and battery on my house as a disconnect and take the 10% of the market that pays the bills away, and then watch the crap hit the fan. So that's a real risk that if we don't move distinctly enough, that we will lose a segment of the market. Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. But when they do that and they separate, they have to put storage to go along with it, which is their backup.
I know. I'm not saying that's right. It's just that that's what people will do because they're fed up.
That's the issue, with renewable, is that it's not reliable. It's a supplement. It's not a substitute yet. Until we can get a reliable storage mechanism in place, you have to back it up. And we talked about the RICE engines or something that can tolerate it. And in fairness, I listened to the early part of the conversation. If you look at the article, I think that you forwarded the whole thing for Jacobs, which included the graph of the production the previous few days, including when they fell off the being able to meet the total demand. Unfortunately, when that happened, at that particular moment, there wasn't a whole lot of sunshine because they were getting snow over most of the state, and the windmills were offline. So you look at the production that came out of wind and solar 3 or 4 days earlier versus what was available when that happened, it wasn't there. It wasn't something they could rely on. And granted, the getting gas in there was a big issue for them to run the existing gas units and things. And Wendell, I think you hit the policy problem dead on, and that is the market has never, whether it's the Texas market, the New York market, California market, none of them have structures in place that really reward a provider to supply capacity without supplying energy.
Right.
The numbers are so low, you say, I wouldn't put my money in that because I can't get a return. I can't pay my debt, much less pay the cost of having to sit there just in case you happen to need it.
Well, that was the real example that I read about the Hornsby battery project in South Australia. They get paid for ancillary services down there, and they paid a third of that battery project off in the first 6 months, because it evened out that interconnection between the two adjoining states, and it allowed all that wind power to go into the grid. And so when you actually price something for what it's worth, a lot of stuff's going to change, and that's our fault. That's the fault of everybody in this business of not pushing for changes in the way you price things. Because if we had the ability to have something sitting there just for a backup, then I wouldn't care so much if it only operated 10 hours a year if it was some old clunker, but I also would be very darn happy that it spurred the addition of 1,000 megawatts of a battery backup because we could actually pay for it. So these are the kind of things that we're not in charge of. We don't make the federal laws on that. We don't make the Florida laws on that. But in our associations and our groups and the way we vote, we can certainly be a voice and a mouthpiece for some sanity in this market. But we're missing the boat big time here on a number of issues that would make us all happier. If we solve some of these, we'd move farther down the road to renewables faster, and we would give some backup to issues of that Ed and Tom have brought up. So, dang, we used to play a game when I was a kid. If I were king for a day, because I'd make some statement, and my dad, well, it's not fair, and he'd say, well, if you were king, what would you do? And he'd force us to make decisions, even as a 9-year-old, and then he'd point out how screwed up we were with our decisions, but he'd let us play the game. But by golly, if things need to change at the national level, at the regional level, and all we can do is push those. That's all we can do. Anyway, that's it. I've been flapping my jaws tonight. Too much chin music. Anyway, unless anybody else has a comment on that, I've flapped enough. All right, we've got a schedule for our next meeting. Thanks everybody for putting up with us, and sorry it was late. I lost my Zoom link somewhere in the Ethernet mangrove swamp. So we'll see y'all next time. Is that it?
Be safe out there, everyone.
Yep. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Night.